Yeah, but I did figure I'd start by talking a little bit about my life and career and sort of what I have done and tell some stories, and hopefully that can spark some conversation as we go. As Adam said, my name is Will. I was born here in New York City, where I still live, and I have been sort of in and around New York my whole life, and sort of in and around the theater for all of my adult life and more of that. I was like a kid who got into theater in middle school, and I really got into it for the community, and I really enjoyed collaboration from the beginning. And that has been sort of my guiding light throughout my career. The applause is nice too. I like the applause, but I have found that there are, I've encountered actors in my life who like hate rehearsals. And that's cool. They're like, oh, I can't wait to get out of rehearsal. I can't wait to get in front of an audience. I can't wait to be done like tinkering with it. And for me, like the tinkering with it is the most fun part. And once we're done tinkering, I'm like kind of bored, and I have to be like restrained from tinkering with it more once we're sort of in a production and locked. Like I said, I grew up in and around New York. We lived out on Long Island, which is like out in the suburbs, when I was in middle school and high school. Moved back. I went to NYU, where I studied musical theater. And I didn't really do anything professionally until after I was out of I had a lot of friends who were like really savvy, and they were like doing summer stock in between every break and every summer and things like that. And I was like uh, just waiting to like start a professional career after I had graduated. I was really committed to education. I also like wasn't sure if I wanted to go into musicals or go into something else, but really the first chunk of my career was focused on musical theater, and specifically new musical theater. I worked a lot with writers and directors and producers. We had a question. We'll be able to view the video later. I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to assume that Adam or Liz does know the answer to that. And pipe up whenever you want to give us that answer. But yeah, so I've worked primarily on new stuff. I am a great. The answer is yes. I am a collaborative creature, and I have had very few occasions in my life where we just like open up the script and like just do the script. I'm used to having the writer in the room. I'm used to having the director in the room. I have a very close collaborator in this guy named Joey Conis, who is a musical theater writer. And he's written many shows that I have done throughout my career. The best known of which is Be More Chill, which played on Broadway in 2019. But before that, we worked on a show called The Black Suits, which was about like a high school garage band, and I played a bassist in the show. And the thing that's been very fun for me throughout my career is like I met Joe when I was 18, and he would come see me in shows at NYU, and I would come see his concerts around the city. And I sort of made my way from like fan to occasional collaborator to like member of his like inner circle of artists. It's basically a repertory company called Joe Iconis and Family. And that collaboration has been so fun and exciting for me. As an actor, it is a very rare opportunity to get to work with a writer who is writing for your voice. But it is a really exciting thing. And it really like, I don't know, just like it just gets me going. That's my like favorite thing. My favorite thing is to walk into a room, get handed a piece of writing that someone else has created, and to surprise them with their own talent. To sort of find things in their text and in their music and in other aspects of their writing that they didn't even realize was in there, and play that up and really sort of bring it to life in ways that are more lively than what is in their imagination. Um, and that sort of walks us into my like major theory of how to collaborate and how to successfully collaborate, which is that everybody needs to show up and like do their job, which sounds very basic, but it's like it's really really crucial that like each person commit to like I'm gonna do the thing that I have been whether or not you're getting paid, but the thing that I've been hired to do, the thing that I'm here to do, I'm going to show up and do. If I'm the director, I am going to call balls and strikes and say, yep, we're going to go this way, we're going to go that way, we're not going to do that. I'm going to take care of this actor's feelings or this writer's feelings about this thing that we're altering because I believe it's the best direction for the show. The producer's job is to assemble the team and to keep everything moving smoothly and to resolve conflicts when they arise and to really sort of make sure that we're all rowing in the same direction, especially outside of the rehearsal room and outside of the theater. And I think an actor's job is to bring as much sort of lively activity and as many sort of ideas as can fall out of their imagination, and really sort of like just be a fire hose of ideas. And I think this extends to, I could break down each job, like, the designers and the wardrobe supervisors and the deck carpenters and the lighting people, it's like all these folks. But like the crucial thing is like you show up, you do the job that you were brought in to do, and you are sort of effusive with and generous with your solutions and your ideas. At the same time, I think it's so crucial that you like stay in your lane. And I have seen processes just like fall apart when it becomes unclear who's on which roles. And so it's like, oh, I'm an actor and I'm suggesting lines to the writer, or I'm a director and I'm sort of too concerned with keeping everyone happy and I'm not concerned enough with like making important decisions. A similar thing can be said for producers. It's like it's important that someone be in charge. So there be a place where the buck stops, because it allows the company to sort of proceed, and everybody's like, okay, well, I know that if I do my job, somebody else is going to do their job, and they're going to keep me from looking silly or keep me from making an expensive mistake or all these things. So it's my sort of core theory is you must be giving, you must be generous, you must be active in your role, and you must stay in your role. And I think that, again, like if the writer starts giving the director notes about when the sets should move, it's like, ideas are welcome, but it's important that we not like let the edges get too messy, because what ends up happening is personalities take over more than good ideas take over. I worked on a show a couple years ago. Whenever I tell a story, I'm not going to use any names to protect the innocent. But I worked on a play a couple years ago, and this was like sort of soon as we were just beginning to do theater again post-pandemic. And the director, who's a dear friend of mine, we were talking, and I was acting in this play, and the director was like, "Oh, I'm gonna be the scenic designer for this show as well." And I was sort of like, "Oh, I didn't know you do that." And his answer was basically like, "Yeah, how hard could it be? I've got somebody who's gonna like, I'm sort of drawing things on a napkin, and this person is turning them into like real designs." And this was like a true disaster. I mean, this was like, we were getting the union involved when we got into the theater because things were unsafe, and we had like these big like column things that were like going to fall over. We had these platforms that were too high and they have railings, and like, yeah, again, it became like a safety issue, all these sorts of issues, and it was a good reminder of like, oh, this person is a very talented director, and should direct the show. And that's not to say that you can't be a multidisciplinary artist, but it's like to do both of those jobs was too much for them. And they would have been much better suited just picking a job, and like hopefully you'd have someone else doing the other job. But then of course you get into like, now we're into the producing world of like, oh, well, it'd be nice to not have to hire a scenic designer and a director. That's a big savings. But we ended up basically hiring a scenic designer anyway to come in and fix these things. Yeah, and then I don't know, just a sort of other, an opposite version of that is I was just out doing a workshop of a new play. It's a play that's for 5 actors, and it's a 2-person writing team. And they brought us out. It's a comedy. It's a comedy that hopefully has a lot of heart. And they basically brought these actors in partially because they thought we might be good in these roles someday, but more so they brought us in because we're all sort of like very generative, active collaborators, and people who have a lot of ideas about how this stuff should go and can go. And they said to us up front, they're like, we feel confident that in a production, we would find all the humor, all the stuff that we're working on. Um, but we hope that the actors that we bring in would help us find like the underlying heart in this piece. And so what that led to was like we read the script and then we sat around and we all talked, as both like, oh, this is what my character would do, I think, having spent, 2 hours with the text. I'm like, this is the impression I get of this person, and maybe we want to push them further in this direction. But we also talked a lot about it's a play about theater. And we talked about our experiences in the theater and the kinds of personalities that come up, and we found opportunities to like really sort of give these characters more dimensionality and more just like to make them fuller and more realized. And that was very exciting because we as actors got to launch ideas at the writers, and they said, "Hey guys, we're going to take tomorrow off, and we're just going to write all day, and we'll see you the day after that." And they came in with like hugely reordered, revised things, and they were excited about it. It wasn't us being like, "Here's what the character should say," but they were excited about the idea of more voices entering the script, and it made the script much richer, much more exciting. It's still uniquely their voice, but it had kind of a new vibe to it and a richer vibe to it. I see a question in the chat from Caitlin. Cool. Will, you talked about the cool reality of having a creator write for your specific voice and have gotten to originate several roles. How does that then impact the process of welcoming successors into the role after you, and advice, if any, you might impart on them? This is tricky. Yeah, so I have been very lucky I have created many roles. In Dear Evan Hansen, I played Jared on Broadway. In Be More Chill, I played Jeremy. And since then I've worked on before then and since then I'm on my way after this to a workshop of a new musical today. But talking about writers writing for your role, for my voice, I think it's first of all, it's very exciting for me as an actor. It's the most exciting thing in the world for a writer to be like, I wrote this thinking of you, and I'm like, whoa, that's so cool. Like it's really like bespoke. But I know that in like the sort of placement and succession process, we had this issue with Jeremy Hansen sometimes where it was very difficult to find replacements sometimes because the role had been so specific. Everyone had spent so much time together that it was almost impossible to imagine anyone else doing this role. When in reality, since then, many people have done it in many different settings. But I think the thing that I would say if you were like someone who's going in to replace in that sort of setting, it's like you need to understand that the thing that makes me unique or the thing that makes you unique is different than the thing that makes yet a third person unique. And I find that the most successful actors, and this is not just actors, this is just like artists in general, are the people who are really good at distilling what they are good at and what they uniquely can bring to a room and leading with that. I think that we all discover like, oh, I'm sort of inclined toward this kind of work, or I have this kind of a voice. And I think the more that you can refine, like, I like doing this, I like contributing in this way, and also people are recognizing this aspect of my creativity. People said, oh, he's really funny, or like, one of the things that I've found in my career is like I'm terrible at like any characters that are sort of like have sort of a dopey vibe about them. There's something about me. I speak very quickly. My features are very sharp. I have a very sort of like piercing voice, and like people don't buy me as like a person who is like slow moving and docile. It just like doesn't work. Hard as I try, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna try to be this way. And I think that is like a valuable lesson for me. That it's like if I'm reading that on the page, I obviously need to do my version of it, but I also need to not be like, okay, so I need to like really get outside of what I normally do, because obviously you want to stretch yourself creatively, but you don't want to move so far from your strengths that you start to not show them and not demonstrate them. And I think going in to replace something that is very iconic or very, sort of you expect it to be a certain way, you can fall into a trap of like, oh, I think it's supposed to be this thing, therefore I'm going to emulate the expected result that I have in my mind rather than sort of letting your own creativity enter the process, and putting your own spin on it. And I think putting your own spin on it is a tricky and interesting trap sometimes. I've worked with many people. This happens a lot with directors. It happens a lot with actors playing iconic roles. It's like, oh well, everybody knows that it's this way, but I'm gonna do it my way. And I feel like that's like a huge trap because in just setting out to do whatever you're doing, you're already doing it your way. And so when you try to like bend something away from, like, you're like, I'm going to be so different with this. I'm going to find such a unique take on this. And you end up sort of forgetting the core element of the collaboration, which is you in conversation with another artist, be that an actor reading text on a page or a director working with a lighting designer. Like, it's those conversations that create the art rather than like pulling away and being like ignoring a voice. And I think that, sometimes you'll go see a revival of a show and you're like, oh wow, this director hates this play. They've done so much to alter it, and like why didn't they just do a different play? Is I feel like a question I ask myself at the theater all the time. Whereas in stark contrast, tomorrow night I'm going to see the new Broadway revival of Cats, which to me is like leaning so far into the original text. The premise is it's set like a if you're familiar with Cats, the plot is they have to choose a cat to go to cat heaven, and so they have a talent show to decide which cat is going to cat heaven, and it's all basically drag. But in this new production, they've set it in the ball culture of yesteryear, sort of Paris is Burning style. So the Jellicle ball in Cats is like a Jellicle bowl, and it's an absolutely delightful revival. I saw it off Broadway, and that's so to me that's like an artist, in that creative team. They're like, we have this reference for ball culture. We see this in this piece, and we're like a conversation with this text that's 50 years old. I think the new, like, I don't know, for me it's like better than the original. I put it in the pile with oh, connection is unstable. Is everyone able to see and hear me all right? Is there Okay, great. Sure. I got a little message from Zoom that said my internet was bad, but maybe it's not that bad. Um, but yeah, it goes in the pile with the Deaf West Revival Spring Awakening, where they found something deeper in the text that was already there. Peggy, I wrote a question in the chat. How have you generally gotten most of your acting jobs? Network, casting, and comments on the difference between. Okay, I should read this out loud for everyone's benefit. How have you generally gotten most of your acting jobs? Network, casting agent, and/or submitting for specific roles? Can I comment on the difference between the hidden acting market and what is available for anyone to audition for? This is a great question, Peggy. So I personally, this is like a crazy thing to say, but I'm going to say it because I think it's true. I think I am bad at auditioning. I really do. I think I am like a very good artist. I think I'm very good at what I do. I don't have like, oh, I'm terrible, but I do think I am often deficient at showing what I'm good at in an audition setting. I have found that when I have worked with people, they love working with me and want to work with me again and again. It's like it is a pattern in my life. It's like I encounter directors and writers and choreographers and producers and other actors, and they're like, man, I love having that guy in the room. He's a lot of fun. And so a lot of my career has been like job to job to job to job. In terms of like, oh, you work with this person, and then that person has dinner with this other person, and they're like, I'm looking for somebody for my reading. You worked with Will, like, does he suck? And the first person's like, no, he's great, he's fun. And like that is honestly how a lot of my career has worked. I will say the exceptions to that are I did just audition for Dear Evan Hansen. That was an audition for a bunch of strangers, and they were into it. But in terms of how it all breaks down, so there are some roles that don't ever nobody auditions for them. They just get offered out. And I find that the way that that works is based on developing some sort of profile within some sort of community. So like the macro version of that is like, oh, we're doing Chicago on Broadway, and we put celebrities in these roles. And so in that case, it's like if you're one of the Real Housewives and like you want to do Broadway, like that is you have a profile in a community. But on a smaller level, like when I was starting in this industry, I spent a lot of time like in basements at like new musical theater writer cabaret shows, because I was interested in meeting and knowing and learning about these writers. And I found as time went on, I was like, oh, I'm seeing the same 30 people every time I go to one of these things. And I imagine that some of that has moved virtually since then. I think that sort of exists in social media circles. It's like, oh, there are like known creators and like, people who are watching these creators, and they get to know each other. You see this in like, I don't know, you see this in like people who comment on the Broadway subreddit. It's like there are these communities that exist. And so I think developing a profile within a community has been really huge for me and can be really huge for people. That takes different shapes in different settings. It could be as simple as like, and again, there's sort of obvious ways that we all know that are like, oh, this person was in this musical and they won a Tony Award, and now everybody's like, oh, that's that person who won the Tony Award. We should have them do all these other new musicals. Like, again, that's a very obvious and visual way that happens. But I see it happen all the time, and like there are actors who you see in this workshop and that workshop and that workshop because they are known for being good in that setting. Um, and then in terms of representation and submissions and stuff, I have to be honest, I don't know how self-submitting works in 2026. I haven't self-submitted in a long time because I have had representation that has handled that for me for a while. The way that I got that representation is the way that everybody else that I know got their representation, which is like you're in a show, whether that's on stage or on film or whatever, and like your friend is in it with you and their agent watches the show and it's like, that guy's good, who's his agent? And it's like, oh, it's nobody, maybe it'll be me. Like that's how like everybody I know got their agent, because like their friend's agent came to their show or watched the movie they made or whatever it is. So in terms of that sort of stuff, that's my like recommendation there. So did I cover all that networking stuff? Yeah. And like, how do you develop a profile in a community? It depends on the community. It depends on the kind of profile you're trying to develop. I think if you want to be a designer, it's helpful to know people who went to Yale. I crack open my playbills on Broadway, and it's like the scenic designer, the lighting designer, and the costume designer all did shows together in grad school. So it doesn't have to be Yale specifically, but I do think that having collaborators is huge. I was talking about Joy Conis and family before, like having a group of people that you collaborate with frequently. None of you only collaborates with each other, and so inevitably these things sort of ripple out. And how do you find that community? I don't know. You find people whose art you like and who like your art, and you sort of figure out the interface of those things. And then you do stuff, and then you do more stuff, and hopefully the budgets grow and the audiences grow and the networks grow, and then before you know it, you've built an industry, you've built a community. I mean, people talk all the time about this being a small business, and it's true because it's just like this circle of people and that circle of people and this circle of people and all the Venn diagram folks between them. Yeah, I hope that answered the question. Caitlin asked, one newer and growing element of collaboration in relation to a theater production is content creation with an eye towards a show's social channels. Yeah, it seems like everyone is trying to navigate what's best, right, fair on that front. Any thoughts, musings on social? Social is so foreign to me, and I've done so much to avoid it. Because I do think it's a little bit of a house of cards. I think that like social content can obviously be a vehicle for propelling people. That just like happens. I just did a show with somebody who was like, he was like, yeah, I got my agent because they found me on TikTok. And I think that is just sort of like the commons of our age. I think that, that is a way for word of mouth to spread. I think you see a lot of like really cringe engineered social content that comes from brands trying to be the like Steve Buscemi with the skateboard over his shoulder meme where he's like, "Hello, fellow kids." Um, so, I mean, I think that there is a democratization and that social media brings, and also a lowering of the barrier of entry that social media brings, which can be really, really good and positive. But I think it also like there's just so much crap. It's like there's so much like stuff to sift through, and I think like it's very difficult for like all but the best like Super Bowl ad marketing people to penetrate through the noise unless they're doing something genuine. Um, yeah, I don't know. I'm very suspicious of it all because I think the incentives of social are actually not aligned with the theoretical benefit to folks in our industry. I think like if you own Instagram or you own X or you own TikTok, your goal is to move commerce through the platform. So even though people are like, "Oh, I became a famous singer by singing on TikTok," it's like they want to have just enough of those stories happen so that you sing on TikTok in order to drive engagement with the app. But like TikTok doesn't actually exist to like incubate singers, and I think that also extends to like shows trying to create social content. And some shows have done better than others, but I think it's because they've resonated with fans. I think that's more what it is. Like I mean, Be More Chill. Similar to like I feel like Project Mincemeat has had a really huge social uh, impact this season. But like when I think about Be More Chill, like it was not engineered, the social life of that show. It was genuinely like the show. There was a community developing a profile in a community. Back to the previous theme. There was a community of theater fans who posted on Tumblr a lot, and they were like, "Yo, do you know this show? It was like it played in New Jersey for 4 weeks 2 years ago." Cart versus horse, absolutely. I think that the tools are not here to help us necessarily, and so I think we can use them. But I think to expect some sort of sea change from them is unrealistic. I think if you look at the hits, like they're not hits because people like them on TikTok. Like people put them on TikTok because they were hits. And like what makes a hit? I don't know. But I think like young people on Tumblr were like, oh my God, Be More Chill ran for 4 weeks in New Jersey in 2015, and this was like 2 years after it closed. Like, and they made this album, and I'm obsessed with this. It's my favorite show I've ever heard. And there was like, I mean, the sort of first time that the New York Times panned Be More Chill, the sort of like headline was all these young people are at their favorite show that they've never seen. And I think like that is more about the content of the show than it is about any sort of social strategy. Um, I do think at one point it's like, oh yeah, we should start like replying to these messages that we're getting because that's going to help sort of build momentum, but it's not the sort of crucial ignition that gets it going. Yeah, I don't know. We're about halfway through our time. Are there any more questions? Toss them out there. I could just keep rambling. Oh, here's a good question from Chloe. How do you handle situations where there are creative differences with your collaborators during pre-production rehearsal stage? This is a great question. So I think this goes back to like everybody doing their job and staying in their lane. If let's say you have two actors who have different ideas about how a scene should go, that is the director's job to be like, this is what we're gonna do. And this is where like leadership comes in, and it's not about being like totalitarian or dictatorial. It's about being like, okay, we've discussed our options, and we're gonna move in this direction. And when someone says that, they are saying implicitly, I will own the potential failure here, which I think is a thing that many people are scared to do. And it's why people don't like being in leadership roles sometimes. But it's like, yeah, if there are conflicting ideas, you gotta have a referee. And I think like there it goes up and up the food chain until ultimately I think in the best world the producer is at the top. The producer is the if there is really like a conflict that must go up and up and up all the way there. I do think the person who is theoretically the boss like needs to at least create the structure for the resolution, if not make the decision themselves. Because I just, as the old saying goes, a fish rots from the head. And so I think you have to, as you work your way up the food chain of any production, and this is true, like, I don't know, I had a friend who was going to be in a TV show, and then he also was going to be in a big movie. And the TV show was made by an enormous tech company, and the movie was made by an enormous film studio, and all of the biggest people in the world were involved with this. And like the CEO of the tech company like got involved with like the scheduling of this production to make everything work. And I think like you can't keep passing the buck. There needs to be like someone who's like, well, we have a scheduling conflict, we have a creative conflict, we have a conflicts happen. They're supposed to happen, and ideally they are resolved healthily and steadily and through normal channels often. Like every day, it's like, should I do this or that? Like I don't know. I think it's this, and it's like, well, I think it's that, and like you resolve those small conflicts all the time, and then if you get like a big one, then then you gotta work it out. I don't know if that's like really an answer for like how to deal with creative differences, but it's the answer that I have. It's like they must be dealt with, and in the end, someone has to say like, this is what we're gonna do, and that also usually involves taking care of the person whose idea has not won, because it can feel when you are in any sort of creative or artistic role, your identity and self worth becomes attached to your work. I think many people feel this way in many fields, but I think in creative fields it's much closer than I don't know if you work at the handbrake factory. You care about making good handbrakes, but I don't think that your identity is imbued in the handbrakes in the same way that it might be if you have done a scenic design and like the door's in a bad place, and so the door has to move. And so this you can make this designer feel like they are deficient or have made a mistake if you say we have to alter what you did for these 10 reasons. And I think it is the job of, again, director, producer, various supervisors to sort of say, like, to help artists get through those feelings of like, oh, you have rejected my identity in, it's not so much rejection of their work, but in the sort of like putting down of their work and the sort of saying like, you have to alter your work, you have to collaborate. I'm going to go back to Caitlin's question. It also feels that the social media conversation has led to a really fascinating and tricky conversation regarding bootlegs as a marketing tool for shows and exposure for individual performers. Yes, the bootlegs. No, it's true that and shows have gotten really like, I suppose it comes from producers. Like they've gotten really sort of laissez-faire about like letting you film the show, because the has changed, and this is an argument that I've actually had for a long time. I am there are various union concerns that are like really worried about you have a piece of theater that takes place in a theater that's going to close at a specific date, and somebody wants to make a video of it that will persist outside of that theater and beyond that date. Whether it's a pro shot or whether it's a bootleg or whatever it is. And there's like a lot of people who are concerned about this. Like part of it is like a financial thing. Part of it is like, oh, you're stealing the product. Part of it is like the actor's like, well, I need to know that this is like the one you're going to keep for posterity, because like we're not used to, we don't film plays usually. Like when we make a movie, it's like we're going to give Leonardo DiCaprio like 12 takes at that big scene. But if you bootleg Leo's third take, like he has no choice in that. And that brings in a collaborator like folks who work on camera a lot say your performance is in the editing, which is really true. Like if you're funny, you usually have comedic timing. Well, if you're in a movie, you're not responsible for the timing because you're not the person cutting between the different cameras and audio tracks. So the editors actually has your timing in their hands. So be nice to your editors. But it is so you get into all of these sort of like this is not how we make these sorts of things. And I understand all that resistance. However, I do feel like things living in posterity forever has become a lot more common in the last 20 years. And I think socially and culturally and societally, like we have to sort of deal with that. Like every day, people are just like making photos and videos that like will be there like in some version of forever. Like it's not really forever, but it's like it feels like forever. You know what I mean? Like there are photos that I took like one day in high school that like I can still grab. They're still sitting in a server, in a Google warehouse somewhere. Um, that's crazy. All that being said, I think like I don't know, man. Like Taylor Swift does a world tour, and then she makes a movie of her world tour, and there are some people who go to the movie instead of going to the concert. Um, but for the most part, people who went to the concert also go to the movie. And people like hear about the movie and they're like, oh wow, the movie was great. We should go to the concert when it's here. And so I think that live performers are a little bit too scared of new media and persistent media. And I'm like a big proponent of like not bootleg the shows, but like let the let the videos get out there because if it's good, then it's just gonna help. But yeah, I do think the bootlegs as marketing tool is like a weird thing. There was a Times article on this recently that made me go like, oh boy, things are getting weird. But things are getting weird in all aspects of our society, not just in entertainment. Let's see. Bradley had an observations collaborative enterprise. If people feel heard, they are more apt to accept a decision against what they wanted. That's absolutely true. Caitlin and I worked with a producer who I thought was incredibly good at finessing these difficult decisions. She did it with food. It was like whenever we're gonna sit down and be like, all right, we might have to cut this character or this scene or replace this actor or all these things. Like whenever you have some kind of really challenging conversation, you'd be like, and here are the sandwiches, which sounds really like silly, but I swear to God, like I mentioned that I'm reading this new musical right now, and we're in this situation where we do 5-hour rehearsals because of tricky union rules. So we have 6-day weeks, we have 5-hour rehearsals. 5 hours is a terrible amount of time to work because if you have like a 45-minute commute and then you're there for 5 hours and then 45-minute commute home, then suddenly you've gone 6.5 hours and you didn't eat because you didn't have more than a 10-minute break. Any workshop that I've ever done where they fed us, the actors and everybody is in like amazing moods the whole time. They're just like, oh wow, lunch, that's so nice. And like lunch carries a cost. You have to pay for it, but also you have to figure out, oh, these people have these dietary restrictions, and so we can't necessarily do this for everyone, or we're trying to include everyone, but it gets really tricky because we wanted to get this place and everything has gluten. That being said, if you feed the people, they're like really, really happy to be fed. And this is like part of the structure of the film and television industry is like you get fed. That's just it. And like on the like most rinky dink low budget movies I've ever worked on where you're making like $100 a day, like they feed you because they gotta, because that's the culture. And I think that it's really yeah, just feed the people. Or figure out what your version of that is that like helps people get along and get their stuff done. I'm gonna keep scrolling through another comment from Bradley. If something gets into the public domain too soon, the better film festivals won't accept it. That's true. It is true that like you don't want to let the stuff get out because the festivals want to premiere this stuff. So I do understand I understand the tension between preserving the product and promoting the product. And I mean, this is a thing that happens all the time where it's like, okay, you're shooting B-roll that you're going to turn into a commercial, and the director's like, well, you can't show that. That's the big reveal at the end of the show. And like the person making the commercial is like, it's the only visually interesting thing that we have. And these are in real tension because like if you are making a commercial, having something that is visually dynamic and interesting is like incredibly important. And what that content is is really important to the artists who made it. And like another version of this is like I just finished reading this book, Project Hail Mary, which is about to be a big movie starring Ryan Gosling. I loved this book. And I'm like so glad I didn't like watch the trailer for this movie before I finished the book, because there was like so much stuff in this trailer that I would have been like, whoa, that happens? And so, like, what do you put in a trailer? What do you show? What lines do you quote? I also like, what sort of creative decisions have they made? Like, a trailer is going to tell, if you're adapting something, it's going to tell potential audiences what choices you made in your adaptation. So like, oh, this actor is giving this kind of performance based on these 6 lines that we put in the trailer, and you, the fan or potential fan, potential moviegoer, might be like, ah, that sucks, I hate that. And then you don't want to go to the movie. Like I already was like, oh, I hate the way that they did that voice. That's stupid. But I don't know that that's what it's going to be like in the film. But like these are really important conversations, and they link up with the bootleg. Like trailers are not bootlegs, but they function similarly in the promotion of a product. It's like a little taste for you in the hopes that you will go buy the whole thing. Yeah. Another Caitlin in the chat. You've had a couple things captured at the Performing Arts Library. Yes, I have. New York Public Library. It's not the same process as a true pro shot, but does that capture process impact your performance as a performer? Absolutely. Everybody's totally freaking weird when the cameras are there. Everybody like loses the show and starts doing like a show. And that show that they're doing is like it's usually the real thing as far as the audience is concerned. But for you inside of it, like everyone on stage is making crazy choices because they know the camera's there. And you do your best not to. You try to be a professional. But lots of professionals have the capacity to behave really unprofessionally. Oh, Caitlin, thank you for linking the article about the TikTok It's Hollywood Reporter, not New York Times. I recommend everybody give that article a read when we're done here, because it's a fascinating thing. Oh, which of my shows are in the public library? You can see Dear Evan Hansen. You can see Be More Chill. And you can see The Baker's Wife. They are all in the New York Public Library's Performing Arts library. Which, if you don't know about this, the New York Public Library up at their Lincoln Center branch has these little. Basically, you can go and you be like, I want to watch the video of Titanic on Broadway. And they can be like, okay, why do you want to watch it? And you can give them like sort of any reason. But I believe, I don't know if this is still the case, there was a time when you could only watch each of these once. Like you can't like go and watch it every week. I don't know if that's still the case. But you have to like sort of be like, I want to watch this thing. And then they take you into a little booth, and you like can't bring your phone in or anything. And they like someone in a control room is like, okay, I'm going to hit play. Are you ready? And you're like, yeah, I'm ready. And then they like start the show, and you like sit and watch the show in this little booth. It's a fascinating experience. I highly recommend it. It is one of the treasures of New York entertainment. Peggy asks, do these productions ever pay for housing, or is it mostly people who already live there? Gluten is bad. Yes, I agree. Gluten is bad. I'm very pro gluten, but if gluten does not agree with you, then I agree. Avoid the gluten. So it depends on what it is. I last or 2 summers ago I worked in Minneapolis. I worked at the Guthrie Theater, and they flew me out and put me up, and gave me a stipend for shipping my stuff back and forth. But the cast was, out of a cast of 10, there were 2 New York hires, 3 if you count the director, 3 New York hires, and then 8 local hires. And so it really depends on the budget. Sometimes you'll get, I'll get an audition that's like, must be New York local hire. So if you're coming from somewhere else, they're not paying to get you out there. Again, it depends on what it is. Thank you, Caitlin, for again linking the New York Public Library and the Performing Arts. It's so cool. I highly recommend it. I don't know where we're on Zoom right now, so I don't know where people are geographically. I don't know if we're all in proximity to William and Mary or somewhere else. But if you're in New York, check out the Performing Arts Library at Lincoln Center, because it rocks. Let's see. What else? Is there anything that's come up? I'm so long-winded that really nothing needs clarification. But if there's anything that was like, oh, you said this thing, and it's sort of, I had a question about it. Bradley says WHRO. I don't know what that is. Is that a? I'm gonna assume that it's a like a local radio station, like an NPR situation, but maybe it's a PBS situation, or maybe it's actually some other abbreviation that I don't know. But WHRO, PBS. We love PBS. I love PBS. If you don't love PBS, reevaluate your priorities. PBS, NPR, I love it. We love public broadcasting. WHR has a program called Public Lens. They showcase local filmmakers. Oh, you can apply to sell them limited distribution of your film if you live in their viewing area or show. That's so cool. I mean, I love, yeah, I mean, I love the various, there are so many. This actually touches on an aspect of that I would say is like a producer's job, but a lot of times there isn't a producer yet, and so it can fall to some other artists in the production. Um, there are so many ways to promote your content. We talked about like TikTok, we talked about Instagram, but there's also all sorts. There are like film festivals everywhere. There are theater festivals everywhere. They're all structured differently. They all have different missions. There are grants, and I wish I could be like, here's some great ones, but there are truly just like so many, and depending on like what you're trying to get out there and where you're trying to get it to, it's like always astounding to me, like when I'll get an email from a friend and be like, my movie is in the East Setauket all women's film festival, and I'm like, I didn't know that existed, but look, there's 40 movies in this thing, and and it's like, and then I'll go to this thing and screen 6 shorts, and I'm like, oh, these are all amazing, and how they do these various distribution networks, they all have their own funding channels. They all have their own criteria. But like, I highly recommend, if you've got a creative project, these, submitting to these sorts of festivals can be really great. That comes after finding the people who you're going to collaborate with to create the project. But I do think like at all phases there are just collaborators and collaborators and collaborators and collaborators. I'm working on a workshop of a new musical this week, so we have a commercial producer who's like hired us and rented the studio and done all this stuff, and then like we're in the room as artists creating stuff, and then that commercial producer will welcome theater owners and artistic directors of theaters and other people who are going to enhance the project financially. It's just like the web of collaborators grows and grows and grows, and like what people contribute to a project grows and grows and grows. Scrolling back. Caitlin, in your early days, I did do some lighting work. I did a little bit of design work, but it was mostly wrench stuff. How do you feel work in the theater, in a non-performance capacity, help shape your work as an actor or collaborator? Oh, I love this question. So yeah, I worked when I was in college. I did a sort of work study program where I would help hang and focus lights for the shows, and I worked alongside professional electricians doing this job. And this gave me a sort of working knowledge of how this stuff worked in the business. And that was my like primary day job for the years until I'm happy to say that for the last number of years, my primary job has been acting and teaching and things like that. But it's all been sort of related to that. But when I was doing the electrician work, first of all, I really loved the work because I think that if you are on the mostly in the actor and actor world side of things, I think the people who end up in the technical side of theater are some of the most fascinating people in the world, because they are all skilled craftsmen who are like, I'm going to go nuts if I just build houses for the rest of my life. So I'm going to use the exact same skills that you use to build houses, but I'm going to build them in theaters, and I'm going to build a new one every month. And that, I think, they are just truly the most fascinating folks I've ever worked with. And getting to understand the culture of real theater technicians and the sort of variety. It sort of reminds me of the people who work in kitchens. Like, if you encounter a great line cook or a great career waiter, like, these people are fascinating artists and craftsmen who often have the most interesting stories. And again, they would go nuts if they like put on a suit and tie and went to an office every day. And so they have found a way to be creative and be generative in their lives. And I think it's just, I love these sorts of people. And also how it's affected my work as an actor and director is like, I am way better at finding my light as an actor. I'm a lighting designer's favorite actor because I always find where they focus the light. And as a director, it taught me a lot about what lighting can do for storytelling. And it unlocked a bigger awareness for me in both acting and directing, where I sort of see myself in the large picture of a production. And so it's like, oh, well, if I'm being lit this way and I'm being mic'd and it sounds that way, or if I'm directing a scene and the lighting is doing this, or the sound is doing that, and the set is doing this, and the costumes are doing this, like how do those elements interact with the performances and with the writing, to create to create a whole thing, because each of it is greater than the sum of its parts. And understanding how you, as an actor, say, collaborate with a lighting designer is incredibly empowering for your work. It really enables you to do better work than you might have done otherwise. Um, let's see, what else have we got? I see Peggy and Bradley connecting. I love that. We love collaboration. We're doing collaboration right here in our lecture. That's amazing. And yes, scenic designers are unbelievable. Oh, and yeah, we didn't even talk about video projection design. Caitlin says video/projection design is being implemented in so many ways, sometimes to enhance the story, and alas, sometimes at a lower cost workaround doesn't suit the story. Does that impact performance at all? People think they can get away with a lot with projection design. Good projection design is incredibly complex and incredibly expensive, and it usually doesn't save you any money over building anything that was going to be really elaborate. So if you're ever working with someone who's like, oh, we'll just do some projections, it's like that person is in trouble. And so you can either let that person know that they're in trouble, or just keep it in the back of your mind. That person's going to have a problem later on, because nothing is worse than like bad projections and bad video, because it just feels so cheap, and it cheapens otherwise good work. However, that being said, I think the potential of video and production design is through the roof. Caitlin, we worked on Dear Evan Hansen. I think the video design it was the set. But we also know that it was incredibly expensive, incredibly elaborate, incredibly hard to maintain. It was like, it brought in a whole extra department in both before we opened, in terms of like there was a whole tech table of like there's a person who's doing graphic and video design that's getting loaded into the person who's doing the projection mapping, and then like that person, and then there's someone after that doing optimization so the video doesn't get like laggy and crappy during the performance. And then like as the production goes on, you've got a whole team of people maintaining the video and updating the video, and a new actor's gone in, so like any content of the old actor that's in the video has to be updated. Like you have to build structures and software for maintaining these things. It's like so elaborate. I don't know if any of you guys have seen maybe Happy Ending, which is currently on Broadway, and I imagine going on tour at some point. I don't know if they've announced it or not, but I'm sure they'll tour. It is the most breathtaking video design I've ever seen in any live performance in my life. And that includes the ABBA Voyage, which is a holographic ABBA show that I saw in London that is coming to New York, where you can see real holograms of all four of them as they were in the 70s. And it's strange. It's really weird. I highly recommend you see it, but it is one of the absolute weirdest cash grabs I've ever seen in my life. I had a great time. I highly recommend it. I don't know. I think I would rather go to a real concert, but I see the appeal. I get it. It was fun. Bradley says, yeah, the better you know their job, the better you can make use of their skills. That's true. And it's also, it's helpful. It's a double-edged sword, though, because you don't want to intrude on someone else's art, but you do want to be excited about the potential of their art. And so that's the sort of tricky balance to find there, which is something that has come up throughout the day. It's like both doing your job and staying in your lane, and being generous in your collaboration and hoping for that same generosity from others. Thank you for leaving the ABBA Voyage. Yes, perceived lower cost workaround never happens, Caitlin. Thank you for linking the Voyage. We've got about 3 minutes until we conclude here. Are there any last minute questions? Anything you're dying to know? I hope this has been exciting and fun and informative. Yeah, I love this business. I love entertainment. I love art. I think that it really invites a certain kind of person. It's not unlike if you've never watched Ken Burns' baseball documentary, I highly recommend you watch Ken Burns' now 14-part series on baseball. And the thing that is so great about it is that it talks about the kinds of people, especially in the first half of the century, who became baseball players. first half of the last century, I should say. I guess we're a quarter of the way through this century. So the first half of the last century, it talks about the kinds of people who found their way to baseball and who found meaning and purpose and fulfillment through baseball. And they are often people who have challenging or just sort of idiosyncratic stories behind them, and they find community and belonging and worth, and they feel powerful because they're good at baseball. And I think that entertainment invites a similar kind of person. You find these same sorts of folks. They're sort of outsiders. They're sort of misfits who have something unique to give that is not always valued by the world at large. Caitlin, asked for the producer brain. No, the answer is probably no. But is there any further tidbit you can share about the new piece you've been developing? Oh wow, you might have to text me after, Caitlin. No, but I can tell you. There's two things that I am developing right now that are hopefully good. One is a new musical based on a very old sci-fi story that is again for a small cast. Takes place in the American West in the 50s and has this sort of great rockabilly vibe. And then the other one is a revival of a great 70s musical that exciting directors are attached to, and exciting actors I assume will show up in the room. And maybe you guys will get to see one of these things one of these days. But it's worth mentioning that my entire career is littered with all of these workshops and out of town productions of shows that no one has ever heard of. And that is the sort of thing that I have committed to in like I'm not the kind of actor who like goes to a regional theater for a summer and like does 4 shows in stock because I'm just kind of not interested in it. It's cool, like if that's what you want to do, that's great, but I like don't want to go to Connecticut and like do South Pacific. As fun as that sounds, I am much more interested in, and also that's like a much more lucrative way to move through an action career. It's like get paid to perform. That's smart. But instead, I have all of these shows that you've never heard of. I did, I again, like plays and musicals, workshops, and they went to theaters out of town and they never came to a larger production and a larger awareness in the world. But that is the sort of career that I have chosen, is this sort of highly speculative, like every production is a startup. And I found it a lot of fun. Bradley, what do you say? Roger Federer, the tennis great, said that he won 54% of his shots, so he lost 46%. Lesson, keep going. That is an excellent note to leave us on. Thank you for giving us that little bit of wisdom. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. Again, I hope this has been fun and educational and informative. And, yeah, thank you for being here.